This is Bill Apter, and we're speaking here once again with Angelo Dundee. Angelo, let me ask you now, it's hard to say, don't be partial to Muhammad Ali, but what's going to happen in the fight in Africa?
Well, I've already been quoted in the papers and every sort of media that I feel one way, that Muhammad will knock out George Foreman 9, 10, or 11 rounds. I base this on the fighters, not personalities or anything. I feel that Muhammad is the perfect style to defeat George Foreman. If I were to format a fighter to beat George Foreman, that would be the style I'd try to format, and you can't copy Muhammad, but it would be a boxing style. The mistake everybody's been making with Foreman is running from him. It's a mistake, because you make him pick up momentum. What you got to do with him, you got to play checkers. You got to give him that side-to-side motion, you got to feint him. George Foreman is going to be at a loss. He won't be able to use that Italian wave with his hands against my guy, because my guy's the innovator of it. I think he beat Joe Frazier watching my guy spin guys, push guys off in the past. So my fella, when he reaches out for my guy lengthwise with his hands, he won't be able to do anything to him, because he's fighting for the first time. The man's going to be eyeball to eyeball with him. In other words, he ain't going to be able to spin him. He ain't going to be able to push him. In the strength department, my fighter is as strong as any fighter in the heavyweight division today. Perhaps stronger. This was proven years ago against Liston when he held him off with one arm and pushed him with one arm. And they said, well, how can he push a big, heavy guy like Liston around? So I said, it all boils down to one thing. The legs. The legs are not in position. Foreman had this thing about walking. No walker can beat my guy. This guy walks at you. He doesn't slide at you. In other words, when he's coming and walking at you, and in between those big swings, he's going to catch punches. Now, the big thing that's going to be proven in this fight is going to be, can Foreman take a punch?
Oh, well, let me ask you this, Angelo. A lot of people, judging from the mail we get, are under the impression that Muhammad Ali is going to try and stay away from George Foreman for several rounds to tuck a George Foreman out and then go in on the attack. Is this completely wrong?
It's completely wrong. It's all according to what George Foreman does. I mean, my fellow's going to react to what George Foreman's going to try to do. In other words, he's not going to fight George Foreman's game. He's not going to lay on the ropes. He knows he can't do that with this guy, because that's sudden death. This fellow with a stationary target is devastating. But if you give a little movement, any kind of movement, it offsets the guy. In fact, I cracked one time. I like to see Dick Seiler, when he's holding a heavy bag, move it 6 inches to either side and see the ineffectiveness of George Foreman's punches. Because when you're there, you're stationary, he's tremendous. He goes under, he goes over, he throws great punches at it. So it's a stationary target, it's a heavy bag. Now, Muhammad gives you angles, gives you movement.
Something Foreman's never really...
Never been in with before. See what happened with Norton. Norton made himself a smaller man for some reason. He bent to the guy. And this made Foreman that much more effective. But I'd like you to sometime look at the film of Norton, Foreman, blot out Norton, and see how wild George Foreman was, how casual he was.
In other words, he's just swinging like crazy.
Swinging, and the guy was there. Now, if you're there to be hit, well, then you're playing the other guy's game. The idea with this fight is to box. Now, boxing is hit and don't get hit. That's what my guy's going to do. My guy's going to be very effective. My fellow's going to look like a puncher against George Foreman, because George Foreman's going to be barreling in. And when you're barreling in, you're going to catch shots. And my fellow's going to be very receptive, hit him good shots. He's going to look like a banger in this fight.
Okay, now a lot of people compare the Ali-Frazier fight with the Frazier-Foreman fight, saying, look how easily Foreman handled Frazier, and look what a tough time Ali had with Frazier. Is this a fair comparison in your book?
It's not a fair comparison, but I mean, it's a fair comparison to their mind, because they got to judge from other fights. But you can never take other fights and try to compare your fighter in the fighting the same way another guy fought. In other words, you're different bodies, different studies, different human beings. There isn't two fighters alike in the world. I've never found two fighters alike of anybody I ever handled. In other words, I'm telling you that Ali, you judge him on his fights with Norton and Frazier, say he's going to get destroyed. But you judge him, you can't judge him from past fights. You throw everything from human beings. There isn't two fighters alike in the world. I've never found two fighters alike of anybody I ever handled. In other words, I'm telling you that Ali, you judge him on his fights with Norton and Frazier, say he's going to get destroyed. But you judge him, you can't judge him from past fights. You throw everything out the window, you get the two individuals, throw them in the ring, and see what's going to be.
Okay, now, the last question. Somebody has got to win, somebody's got to lose this fight, obviously. In either case, what would happen to Muhammad Ali? If by some chance he did lose this fight, does he retire? And if he wins, does he retire undefeated?
No, Muhammad Ali won't retire. Muhammad Ali will keep fighting. I say this because he likes what he does. In other words, boxing is his thing. He gets juiced up being around newspaper guys. He gets juiced up you pointing the microphone at him. He gets juiced up a guy pointing the camera at him. And he's instant star quality. I mean, let's face it, we're going through an era in boxing. Muhammad Ali has been an era. And ironically, he's got to lick George Foreman to prove to everybody what I've been saying right along, he's the greatest heavyweight of all time.
Okay, fine. Bill Apter with Angelo Dundee.